My conversation with the mayor, Muriel Bowser, coming up in around 20 minutes, around 10:20, 10:25. We talk about the state of the RFK deal. Yes, the city council last night, I guess, got together with some members of the team at a lovely Italian restaurant on Prospect Street called Cafe Milano last night. That happened, and the news broke on that after I talked to her, but nothing came out of it definitive as of now. Anyway, Mayor Bowser, 10:20 this morning. This from Quinn to start the show. Kevin, you've already done a show asking the TJ Watt, Terry McLaurin trade question. Please let me help you today. Don't do it. It's never going to happen. And the responses will drive both of us crazy. To think that most fans wouldn't want TJ Watt, even if it means giving up Terry, is mind-numbing. Quinn, thanks for trying to produce the show today. Yeah, we are going to talk about TJ Watt potentially being available. And Adam Schefter had some stuff yesterday on Terry and JJ Watt, which we'll get to here in a moment. We did a poll last week. We sort of just did the hypothetical. Would you just swap out, Terry for TJ Watt? Now, just so everybody understands, TJ Watt's value is much greater than Terry McLaurin's. So you'd have to give up, probably more than just Terry McLaurin to get TJ Watt. I had some of you saying, only if it comes back with draft picks too. You guys are out of your mind. TJ Watt is valued much higher than Terry McLaurin. Both great players, but come on, like the top 100 NFL players ranking list is going to start coming out, I think today, right, Max? Today it'll start coming out probably in, 10 at a time over the next, several weeks. But CBS Sports did their NFL top 100 last week. TJ Watt was ranked as the 11th best player in the league, and Terry was the 81st best player in the league. Terry's good. I think he was 12th among the receivers, 10th or 11th, 12th, something like that among the receivers. But he's not TJ Watt. Come on, people. Watch more than just our games. Please. TJ Watt is a massive difference maker. He's one of the 3 best defensive players in the game. But we did the poll last week. I can't say that I was shocked. I was surprised at the results, but we did the poll last week on Twitter with contract rumors swirling. Kevin wants to know if Commanders fans would rather have Terry on the roster next year or TJ Watt. 75% of our fans said Terry. 25% said TJ Watt. I love the devotion to Terry, and that's not condescending. I do. I love that there is a player on the team and has been on the team that's been worth sort of the praise and the feeling of one of ours and the respect, everything. He deserves all of it. I mean, he dealt with the worst of times and then last year finally got a taste of nearly the best of times. And we saw what kind of player he could be last year with a really good quarterback. He had terrible quarterbacks before last year. I mean, horrendous non-starting NFL quarterbacks. He had decent backup quarterbacks. I got this from Michael T. yesterday. Kevin, why do you always put Terry McLaurin into the other category? He's much more than other or afterthought. He's not top 10. He's top 5. You're just wrong and harsh when it comes to him. Yeah, I just can't buy into that. I think that he's much closer to 10 than he is 5. And I've given you my reasons before. First of all, I could list easily 8 or 9 that I would rather have. But if you were just, joining the conversation and you said, let me just at least look at like some numbers. I mean, Terry finished 19th last year in the league in receptions after one of the best years, really the best year of his career. 19th. He was 15th in receiving yards. 15th. He was 32nd in the league in average yards per catch. Now, these are just traditional, statistics. I mean, there is the eye test. There are advanced numbers. He did have 13 touchdown catches, the best of his career. He finished second in the league to Jamar Chase with 13 touchdowns. Jamar Chase had 17 touchdowns. Quarterback does make a difference. 7 was his career high before last year. He did that as a rookie with Case Keenum throwing him the majority of those touchdowns, I would guess, right? 2019, Case Keenum. First game that Terry played against Philadelphia, Case Keenum was the quarterback. I forget how many games Case Keenum played that year. It was a forgettable year for sure. But the best year he had leading up to last year was 4 or 5 touchdowns. 4 or 5. He had 13 last year. That was an outlier. The 19th in receptions, 15th in receiving yards, 32nd in average yards per catch are not outliers. Now, I think he's better than the 19th best receiver in the league or the 15th best receiver in the league or the 32nd best receiver in the league. I think he's somewhere around 10, plus or minus a spot or two. He's not TJ Watt, people. And you're not getting TJ Watt. First of all, I do agree with Quinn. This is not happening. The Steelers are not going to trade TJ Watt, and I don't believe Washington is going to trade Terry McLaurin. But I think if TJ Watt were available, Washington should 100% be interested. And with the trade yesterday that the Steelers made, trading Minkah Fitzpatrick for Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith, and there were some picks involved in there, it shows they're willing to do, player for player. I don't want to part with Terry McLaurin. I don't. I mean, what will we have at wide receiver? I mean, Deebo Samuel, we would be hoping big time that, you've got Noah Brown healthy and Luke McCaffrey steps up, etc. I mean, we might have to start rooting that Michael Gallup isn't washed up. Not that he was ever, a star player anyway. I don't want to part with Terry McLaurin. But if you entertain TJ Watt in a TJ Watt trade conversation as Washington, Pittsburgh's not just taking Terry back. You'd have to give up more. I hope people realize that. This is not apples to apples in terms of the players. Now, trade value, demand, interest in moving on from, contract, compensation is always a part of the conversation. And we always get it wrong. But in terms of the two players, and I saw a lot of this morning as I was preparing for the show, I would do it if we also got, a first or a second back from Pittsburgh. You're high. It's the other way around. Like, you'd have to give up more than just Terry to get one of the top 10 to 12 players in the league back in a trade. Not a first rounder, no. And Washington doesn't have a lot of draft compensation moving forward. It might just be like a third or a fourth or something like that, but it's not a man up trade. That would be stupid for Pittsburgh to do. It reminds me of one of the dumbest deals. All due respect to Clinton Portis, who I love dearly, but one of the dumbest deals in franchise history. I mean, this was really at the height of everybody calling to see if Washington would do a trade with them because they knew they would get the better of the deal. But Champ Bailey for Clinton Portis, where Washington ended up giving up, in addition to Portis, a second rounder for a future Hall of Fame corner who was already an elite level corner. We know the difference, right? Much harder to find corners than running backs. That was one of the all-time dumbest trades ever. Clinton turned out to be a really good player here, and Champ turned out to be a really good player there. And I think they drafted Tatum Bell with the number 2 pick that they ended up getting from Washington. I think that's who it was. But it should have been the other way around. So teams are dumb sometimes, and they don't understand the value of players. And there's a lot that went into that Champ Bailey. One of these days, somebody is going to, spill the beans on the entire Champ Bailey out of Washington deal, because there was a lot going on But in terms of just value, Washington shouldn't have been the team giving up the second. They should have been the team receiving the second with the player. And in this particular case, all due respect to those of you who believe otherwise, unless Pittsburgh's stupid, you wouldn't be able to just trade Terry for TJ Watt without giving up a little bit more. I'm not saying a lot more, but they're two different players on the, value. TJ Watt's a top 10-ish player in the league. Terry McLaurin is a top, 75-ish player in the league. Still pretty impressive, but not what TJ Watt is. So, Quinn, we are going to probably talk about this on the show today because there was a lot that came out yesterday. This was Adam Schefter yesterday being asked about the Terry situation in Washington by the Pat McAfee show.
Shefty, last time we talked to you, we mentioned how Terry McLaurin and Washington are pretty far apart on his, new contract. He's not happy about that. Has there been any progress with that whole situation, or do you have any kind of update there?
That's a tough one. I know there's no update, which is the update, and that's the problem. The problem is with this particular situation, I think Terry McLaurin is going to argue that we've seen other wide receivers who his numbers are comparable to, like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and DK Metcalf, get paid over $30 million a year this offseason. And I think the Commanders then can say yes, but Mike Evans, who also has had comparable numbers, is at $24 million. So there really is quite a difference and a gap between what both sides would want. They have not made any progress. I would think that we'll see if there are any teams that decide to come snooping around Terry McLaurin to see if they could try to pry loose Terry McLaurin, who, by the way, I cannot envision the Commanders moving on from, no matter how disgruntled he may be. Again, it's sort of like TJ Watt. You can't imagine that these two sides, as far apart as they are today, wouldn't be able to somehow find a way to bridge their differences and figure out a solution. But today, McLaurin and the Commanders are not close. Watt and the Steelers are not close. And those will be two of the storylines that we are tracking as we get ready for training camp.
Adam Schefter yesterday on the Pat McAfee show. Later on in the afternoon, he also said multiple teams have shown interest in trading for TJ Watt. Suggesting that maybe Pittsburgh has, is not that far away from perhaps being willing to discuss it. I agree with what Adam said at the end. I don't think either player is going to get traded. Pittsburgh and Washington are similar, but so different. Similar entering 2025. Similar in that it feels very much like both franchises are in win now mode, but for totally different reasons. Pittsburgh's in that mode because they've got a quarterback in Aaron Rodgers that is going to play his last season more likely than not in 2025. And they're going to try to, get as much out of the best quarterback situation they've had since Roethlisberger, a healthy Roethlisberger, was in Pittsburgh. So they're going, all in maybe is an exaggeration, but they're really focused on trying to win it all or go as far as they can in 2025. Whereas Washington's all in as well, but it's because they've got a quarterback on a rookie deal who is 16 years younger or 17 years younger, whatever it is, than the other quarterback. That's why I just don't see Pittsburgh moving on from a player who would have, if they were to have a great season, and let's just say win 12 or 13, contend for an AFC championship, I would put them right now in the AFC. Me personally, I would put them behind, obviously, Buffalo, Kansas City, Baltimore. But unlike many, I think I saw Aaron Rodgers play at a pretty high level at the end of last year as, the Achilles injury started to get more into a groove. They added Devontae Adams. It was a terrible team defensively. They were a terrible team special teams-wise with their kicker situation. I think Aaron Rodgers played not MVP Aaron Rodgers football, but he played like at least a top half of the league starting quarterback at the end of the year. And if Pittsburgh got that from Aaron Rodgers, with DK Metcalf and Freiermuth and now Jonnu Smith, who was a part of that deal, I think Pittsburgh would be fourth for me after Buffalo, Kansas City, Baltimore. I think they would, but they can't move on from TJ Watt. They got to figure out a deal and keep one of the three best defensive players in the league. And I do know, when the Steelers got into that slump at the end of last year, a lot of it had to do with what they were offensively, but they also, started to slump defensively when they lost 4 or 5 in a row at the end of last year, heading into the postseason, when really the game against Baltimore wasn't very competitive. But a lot of that was pressure put on the defense because offensively, they just weren't consistent enough with Russell Wilson at the helm. They struggled to score at times, but they also had some games last year, like here, when they had the big throw to Mike Williams late in the game for the lead. It was Mike Williams, right? The former Charger receiver who had signed with Pittsburgh that caught that touchdown over St. Just in the fourth quarter for the lead. I got to look that up. I think it was Mike Williams.
It was Mike Williams.
Yeah. That was probably the best throw of the year for Russell Wilson.
It was great throw. And
great throw.
It helped us quite a bit. It killed Benjamin St. Just.
Yeah, I mean, that process may have started even before.
Well, sure. But it was the final nail in the coffin.
By the way, I forget, where is Benjamin St. Just? Where did he land?
I believe he is a Los Angeles Charger.
Yeah, I think that's right, actually, right when you said it. All right, so we will, Quinn, much to your dismay, we will end up having this conversation. And it's more about, what would you be willing to give up for a TJ Watt? Look, that is a missing piece. You look at our roster, and it's obvious when you look at the roster, without knowing a lot about what the coaches think, because the coaches may think, no, you guys don't know what's coming with, Javon Kinlaw. You guys have no idea what Frankie Louvu is going to be like in year 2 in this system, and you have yet to see how good Javonte Jean-Baptiste is. We think he is, a potential star as a pass rusher. I mean, they may think a lot of things about the team, and they obviously have much more information. But when the run-of-the-mill fan of the team looks at the roster, what's glaring? No defensive pass rusher. No defensive star. I think Louvu's an emerging star. I mean, he was a second-team All-Pro linebacker last year, so he's recognized as a star linebacker. But I'm talking about getting to that level where people talk about him, in the way they, not necessarily in the way they talk about Myles Garrett or TJ Watt or Trey Hendrickson, but maybe that next tier down. But that's the glaring hole. TJ Watt would fill that glaring hole easily. Yeah, I'd be interested if I were Washington. I'm trying to win the GD Super Bowl this year or next. Yeah, you got to pay him. But pass rushers age well typically. He's 30, and he is, he's a dominant, game-changing defensive player. Period. Haven't had one of those since Sean. Mayor Bowser next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. So a few things happened yesterday. Phil Mendelssohn told Fox 5 that the vote on the RFK Stadium deal might not happen until mid-September. They are taking their time. And then last night at Cafe Milano in Georgetown, it was reported by our friend Eric Flack and I think others that the city council was meeting for dinner with some of the Washington Commanders ownership group, including Josh Harris. Now, yesterday, early afternoon, I had a conversation with Mayor Bowser before some of these things came out about the state of the RFK deal. I started off by, asking her how many times a day does somebody come up to her or text or call and say, is this RFK football stadium thing going to get done or not?
Well, I'm getting it more now. I think that DC residents and sports fans alike have been excited since we made the announcement that we have an exclusive agreement with the Washington Commanders to bring our team home. And people want the council to do their deliberations, get their questions asked, and approve our deal.
You said last week, you tweeted, DC's on the verge of the single largest private investment in our city's history. We've secured a partner in the Commanders who will bring $2.7 billion and kickstart the development of the rest of the RFK campus. We can't let this window of opportunity close. So, is it closing?
Well, this is how I live my life, Kevin, and it has been borne out in many, many experiences, is that sometimes in life, windows of opportunity open. And those people and those organizations who are successful figure out a way to get through the window, because you never know when it's going to close. You never know how fast it's going to close. In this case, I negotiated an exclusive agreement that runs through July 15th after many months of negotiation. And after kind of our own Hail Mary late December of last year, where we got the site in DC's control after decades and decades of being under the control of the National Park Service. So we've done a lot of work. We have the right partner, and the time is now.
Right. And it's been 2 months since that, exciting, borderline celebratory press conference with you and Josh Harris and many, former players, et cetera. And today, Chairman Mendelssohn told Fox that he would not call the council to a vote during their August recess, meaning that it could get pushed back to mid-September. So your thoughts on where the council is right now on the vote?
The council has a lot of daylight ahead of it in this session. They can be and consider my budget proposal all the way through August 4th. And we know that we're going to keep working. The team and I are in lockstep on making sure all the council members have the information that they need, and so that we can get there. What I can't do as mayor of the district is, having gotten us this opportunity and secured $2.7 billion, no sports teams are paying towards stadiums anywhere in the United States of America. But we secured a $2.7 billion investment. The team is going to be responsible for building the stadium and any overruns related to building the stadium. And we will be able to develop the rest of the 180 acres of the campus, which could include up to 5,000 or 6,000 units of housing.
Look, you've done a good job of presenting this. I think you communicate very well to begin with, just as an aside. But with respect to this issue, it's obviously been communicated well, because the majority of DC residents recently polled are in favor of getting this done on the RFK site. That's unusual when any level of tax dollars are going towards building a new stadium. You said last week, you indicated in that Post story that the team's not happy about the potential delays in voting on this. How would you describe where you are today in terms of frustration or losing patience?
Well, this is what I know. And, I served almost 8 years on the council of the district. I chaired the council's economic development committee. I delivered the legislation that approved the Audi field. So I know how the legislative process works. I know the tools that are at the council's disposal. And I think that everybody should be treating this urgently. Nobody should have the kind of nonchalance that I've heard from some that, oh, well, what's a month? What's 2 months? What's 3 months? I think it introduces a level of uncertainty and risk that's intolerable for most business organizations. And the political uncertainty is also real. So that's why it's important that once everybody has what they need, and the council has done its own study, which I understand will be delivered in July. Actually, this week, July 3rd, I was told they would have a draft. They scheduled a hearing. We think they should advance that hearing to no later than July 21st. And I know a lot of people are interested to testify. And then that will line them up for a vote. Now, a lot of people have spoken very positively about the stadium and getting there. So I think everybody just needs to buckle down, work day and night if necessary to get any issues ironed out and vote.
What you just said, buckle down, work day and night. I hear the urgency in your voice. I would imagine that this is what Josh Harris and Mark Ein and Mitchell Rails and the key people with the team, that they are urging as well, that it's roll up the sleeves time and get it done. Have they expressed that to you?
Listen, these folks have been at the table with us really since last June, working on a great plan. We brought in the world's best in terms of finance and also stadium development. And that's how we got to the deal that we got to. And so I won't speak for the team. I do know that I have the only exclusive agreement right now. And I don't want to lose it. And no one should want to give that up.
What are the reasons right now? Net it out as to why it's taking the council so long.
Well, I want to be fair to council members. It's a big deal, and all stadium projects have their, some level of back and forth. So I get that. They're considering my budget. I get that. But all budgets are handled in 70 days. That's what the statute allows. And this is a budget item. And so the council has the ability to consider it as such. And like I said, I think they read the tea leaves. They see that DC residents are supportive. They understand if nothing happens here, that site may not be developed for decades because we don't have another big investor. We don't have another employer or company saying, hey, DC, here's $2.7 billion. Why don't you get started at RFK? We have the right partner who's bringing these dollars to the table and guarantees us activity, jobs, and economic activity at that site in 2030. Now, everything that the council does to delay it puts at risk some big events. The Women's World Cup is coming, and if we don't have a stadium on the way, they're going to pass us by, just like the World Cup has passed us by that's coming to the U.S. So time does matter in terms of being able to deliver and the economic development that comes with the stadium being open. But I think the time also matters in terms of introducing more risk, political risk, economic risk, financial risk, you name it. More risk is the only thing that comes out of a delay. You
said 70 days to consider, a budget item, which this is. Where are we? About 60 days since you guys signed the term sheet with the team?
August 4th, I think, is the 70th day of the budget cycle.
Mayor, what are the issues with the council? What part or parts of the deal that you cut with the team back in April do you think they want tweaked or even changed entirely?
Well, they won't tell me. I mean, literally, they won't tell me. So I think they gave more to the Washington Post last week than they've told me or the team. And so that's what I'm talking about when I say let's all get in a room, hammer it out, and come up with if there's terms that make sense. Now, I will say, like, we didn't leave a lot. I don't think we left anything on the table. Like, we negotiated hard. We got $2.7 billion, a roofed stadium that's going to generate tons of economic activity. So I think we've always expected that the council members would negotiate a community benefits package with having spoken to the community and focused on getting DC residents employed, having small businesses have opportunities on the site, focus on youth sports. By the way, our deal includes building an indoor sportsplex that would be for DC. And so I think that it's always been contemplated that that community benefits package would be negotiated at the council's process. And I'm looking forward to that being delivered at the same time.
The negotiation exclusivity runs through July 15th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are you concerned that post July 15th, the team will negotiate with, say, Maryland as an example?
Listen, I think the team wants to be at RFK. We want them to be at RFK, but they do business. They don't do politics. And so I think that we have an agreement. I stand by our agreement, and we both stand side by side in our willingness to answer all the council's questions and get to a yes this summer. And that's important. Now, I've been around this long enough to know, and you know what we went through last year with our sports teams. And so that's why having a period of exclusivity was like, I insisted that be a part of the term sheet. And that's why I protected so vigorously, because I was that other jurisdiction. Okay. I was that other jurisdiction when I see a deal that wasn't solid. Our deal is solid. We have a signed term sheet. That wasn't the case in the Virginia deal, but I know how this can go, and so I think we all need to treat that period of exclusivity with the seriousness that it deserves.
All right, two more, because I'm adding this one. I'm just curious, do you know how much revenue a 2031 Women's World Cup would generate for the city?
Oh, I do. We have kind of a back of the envelope, and I think we estimated a delay. I don't want to guess. I'll get somebody to get it back to you.
Okay.
But it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars of delay of economic activity.
All right, last one, and this is sort of, the way I do things on radio. Level of concern. 5, you're really concerned about this deal getting done. 0, you've got zero concern. Our football team's going to be playing in a brand new stadium on the RFK site by the year 2030. Where are you today?
That's a good question. Listen, I'm concerned right now that everybody buckle down and get to work. I believe I'm not concerned about our deal. Our deal is solid. It pays off for DC. And at the end of the day, I think everybody wants the same thing. So I would put my level of concern, because, when you're a big city mayor, you're concerned about everything. I'll put it at a 4.
Okay. Well, that's one away from very concerned, but we'll leave it at that. Bring it across the finish line. I know you've done, most of what you need to do, and this rests probably a lot with the council at this point, but thanks for the time as always.
No.
Hope you're well.
Thank you. We're going to get it done. Have a good one.
That was Mayor Bowser, conversation I had yesterday with her. Again, last night there were reports of a dinner meeting between ownership, football team ownership, and some of the city council. We'll see if anything comes out of that. I am curious because I know there are a lot of smart people, or at least some smart people listening to this show who may even have some insight as to how these things get done. We haven't had anything like this really since the baseball stadium. And that barely passed the city council back in 2006 or whatever year that was, 2005. But where do you think this is? The mayor at the very end expressed a level of 4 on a concern scale of 0 to 5, 5 being very concerned, 0 being zero concern over this deal getting done. I thought Mendelson's statement to Fox 5 yesterday was what she talked about. I think you could hear in her voice and in what she said multiple times that there is a sense of urgency that she and the team wished the council had, and maybe the council has very good reasons for not being urgent, or maybe they believe they're being urgent, and perhaps they are. But, locking yourself in a room for day and night, as she talked about, until you've got all of the information and you are ready to vote, seems to be a path they might consider traveling long before September, because the team does want to make a $2.7 billion investment in the city, and they want to open this stadium in 2030, and they want access to some of the big events that will be coming right around then. 2031, the Women's World Cup. Remember, that's not a one-day event either. That is a multi-week event with several games, and it is a tremendous economic windfall for cities that host it. I would imagine the Men's World Cup is even exponentially higher, but the Women's World Cup is a big event as well, and this is really, comparatively to a lot of U.S. cities, a strong soccer market. So if you want to weigh in and you've got strong thoughts and maybe even some experienced thoughts on this, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. I still think it gets done. It gets done in a manner in which the team is not forced to, threaten going back to Maryland or Virginia or anywhere else to have conversations. The team's made it very clear they want to be in D.C. The deal with the city appears to be a good one for the team as well. So I think that ultimately everybody gets it together here over the next, say, month, and it gets voted on, and they get 7 votes. And we're, on a path, and the process begins towards building not just a stadium, but everything that will go up around it and on that campus sometime later this year. 301-230-0980 if you'd like to weigh in on anything that the mayor said or anything regarding this situation. I'd be happy to hear what you have to say. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
All right, NBA free agency is officially underway. Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr. signed a 5-year deal worth up to $240 million to stay in Memphis. And the Nuggets traded Michael Porter Jr. to the Brooklyn Nets in exchange for Cam Johnson. And reigning MVP Shai Gilgeous-Alexander signed a massive 4-year deal worth $285 million, giving him the largest annual salary in NBA history. NHL free agency continues as the Caps signed 25-year-old defenseman Declan Chisholm to a 2-year deal yesterday. And this morning, Martin Ferravari has reached a deal with the team to stay in Washington, signing a 7-year deal worth up to $42 million. Tonight, the Nats return from their West Coast road trip to take on the Detroit Tigers. Jack Flaherty takes the bump against Trevor Williams. First pitch will be at 6:45. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 6:15 on The Fan. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1 and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
11 a.m., 10 minutes from now, Nick Farabaugh from the Steelers Breakdown podcast is going to jump on with us. We'll talk about TJ Watt and, what percentage chance he thinks the Steelers would actually trade him. Right now, 301-230-0980. The mayor told me that on a concern scale, a concern scale, 0 equals 0 concern, 5 equals very concerned. I asked her, where is she right now when it comes to getting a deal done? Not just getting a deal done, getting the city council to approve the deal that she negotiated. Where is she concern-wise? And she said a 4. Where are you and why? 301-230-0980. Our guy Hayden in Arlington. Hayden, what's up?
Well, I'll match her 4, Kevin. I don't think she has the votes right now. I think she's got a council of crooks. Maybe not all of them, but I think some of these people are out there to line their pockets. But the reason I'm at a 4, not a 4.5 or a 5, is I think that the ace up the sleeve is President Trump. I think that he's going to be the knight in shining armor here, and he's going to get this deal over the finish line.
How?
I think when you've got the power of the IRS and the power of the federal government to do some investigating on these crooks, I think that's the way to back channel these people to get them to vote the way you want. I'm sure their pockets will be greased along the way. But when you've got the power to investigate them federally, and we've got one councilman currently.
What would the incentive be?
His incentive? His incentive is he loves to have these big projects built. I think he wants to get credit for having the stadium built. And when they're playing that the Women's World Cup here in 2031, he'll be there with a big smile on his face saying, I was the one who got this built. I think,
okay.
And he said so immediately after the initial release. He was fully on board, showing pictures of the design, showing how beautiful it looked, having the Capitol in the background.
Yeah.
And don't forget that they do. Congress could. I don't think it would ever get to that. I don't think that the Congress was going to get involved, but they could compel the DC. They control the DC budget. If they wanted to compel the DC budget to pay for the stadium, they could.
Well, let me just say, the part that you didn't emphasize, which, I don't think that he'll get involved in this. I don't at all, actually. But is that Josh Harris and the president are very friendly. Josh Harris was a big contributor to his campaign and has been actually helpful as a consultant, was during the first Trump administration. So that might be a reason. Thank you, Hayden in Arlington. We'll talk about more important things like the recruiting class that Buzz Williams has coming in the next time we speak. JYD, go ahead.
How you doing, Kevin? Well,
hey, JYD, what's up?
I think the deal will get done, but the city council is treading sort of lightly, simply because I think they are also waiting to see how much Medicaid for the city, food stamps for the city, for the poor who can't provide for themselves. What's in the big beautiful bill,
Right.
So what other commitments the city is going to have,
right,
which will
yep.
have to take place. So I think I think that's why it's not getting done right now.
All right, JYD, appreciate it. Yeah, they are obviously they've made that effort to separate the stadium from the 26 budget. There are a lot of political issues. There's a lot that the city's been dealing with here over the last several months. I understand all of that, and she was very, she emphasized the difference between politics and business. And that, Washington's football team ownership, they don't deal in politics. They deal in business. A $2.7 billion investment into this campus is the best offer they've had. We know as city residents, as DC residents, what that area has looked like, what that campus has looked like now for decades. Even when they were playing soccer games and even baseball games for a few years, we know what it's looked like, certainly for the last 10 plus. They've got an opportunity to do something with it. By the way, I didn't answer the question. How concerned am I on a scale of 0 to 5? 0, no concern. over the deal getting done, 5 very concerned. I would be at like a 2, maybe even less than that. The mayor has to be concerned. By the way, it's also beneficial for her to look like, she's concerned and that the city council is delaying this and putting it at risk, political risk, business risk, etc., only to have it, completed and done, where she's not setting the expectation bar beyond where she should. So I think that's probably the right way to go. But I think I'd be at like a 1 right now, a 1, maybe a 1.5. Kevin in DC. Kevin, where are you? Concern scale on the RFK deal getting voted on and passed by the city council. 5 very concerned, 0 not concerned at all. Where are you?
I'm a 4.5 right now. Born and raised several blocks from the RFK site. Diehard Redskin Commanders fan. This is DC's big, beautiful bill. And I say that in the sense that, the Congress pulled back $1 billion of DC money. And what the mayor is doing to get this stadium is she is taking a hatchet to essential services in the DC. I'm for the stadium, but I'm not for cutting out child care. I'm not for cutting out police officers. I'm not for cutting out firefighters. At the same time that crime is escalating in DC, carjackings are escalated, and to satisfy the bill or the stadium, you're cutting the services that we need to reel in some of these other major issues in our city.
By the way, haven't carjackings in DC come down significantly over the last year? I thought that I've read that recently. 2023, early 2024, it was a major problem, but then it, I think a lot of these, I forget what they call them, almost pop-up police areas in some of the areas in town, carjackings, I thought have fallen significantly in the last year. I could be wrong. Yeah.
So just your regular carjackings might have dropped, but they're more violent now. People are dying while being carjacked. A lot of the murders in DC. I am actually a community advocate. I actually pastor a church in the city, so okay. I'm in the meetings, and the violent carjackings have increased throughout the city. And I think that what the council is saying is that, this stadium is going to hurt our constituents. It's going to hurt our constituents because now you're going to roll back what we put in place to address these violent crimes to satisfy a beautiful stadium. And I think that she needs to kind of relook at if you look at the budget that she proposed, it strips the things that have been put in place over the last five years to help with the issues in DC. She needs to find other ways to pull back money and resources instead of those essential areas.
Kevin, thanks for the call. Appreciate it as always. And I know you've been here your whole life. Those of you that I didn't get to, maybe we'll come back to it next hour, but we do have a guest scheduled. Nick Farabaugh from the Steelers Breakdown podcast will join us next. We'll talk about TJ Watt and whether or not it's true that he might be available. That's next. The Steelers have been in the news pretty much since the season ended, and Aaron Rodgers was a possibility, but it increased yesterday with the big trade, Minkah Fitzpatrick to Miami for Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith, some picks involved in that, and then Adam Schefter suggesting that perhaps TJ Watt is tradable from Pittsburgh. We've heard some of that here in Washington about Terry McLaurin. Nick Farabaugh is a Steelers beat reporter for Penn Live. He's also the host of the Steelers Breakdown podcast. You can follow him on X, on Twitter, at Farabaugh, FARABAUGHFB. Nick joins us right now. So, we've kind of dealt with it a little bit here with Terry McLaurin in the contract situation. They're similar in terms of, both sides appear to be far apart. I think my default when it comes to Terry is they'll never trade him. They want him on this team. He's been through the worst of times and he endured just some of the worst teams and worst situations, and he's become a fan favorite. I don't think they'll deal him. I think they'll come to an agreement. What do you think happens with TJ Watt?
I think they end up coming to an agreement 2 or 3 days before the season begins. And that's been fairly typical with the TJ Watt deal. It was last time. They've done it before with Cam Hayward last year, Pat Freiermuth. The Steelers wait a long time to get these done, and they don't budge. And so things become contentious. I mean, Cam Hayward is a similar guy to TJ Watt in that he's been with the Steelers forever, and he was very openly not happy with his contract situation last year. He wanted extended. He got one by the end. And so I think this is going to play out very publicly probably in terms of TJ Watt's unhappiness. The Steelers kind of jabbing back and forth with him in terms of saying he's not going in. I don't think the Steelers have any intentions of trading him. I've talked to people since the combine that have told me he's not going anywhere. So I think TJ Watt eventually gets this deal done. It's just going to be, does he get more than Myles Garrett? Does he get less than Myles Garrett? Does a Michael Parsons extension come in before that? Aiden Hutchinson, Hendrickson. There's a lot of different guys that salary up even more than Myles Garrett's right now. But I think TJ Watt wants to set a new market for the edge rusher position and get more than Myles Garrett, and I think that's the sticking point right now.
Nick, how good is TJ Watt still?
He's very good. He's still a very good player. Last year he played down the stretch hurt. He played with a bad ankle, a bad thumb. He had a wrist injury on top of that on his other hand, so he didn't have much power in his hands. He's still a really good player. I know he's kind of an outlier type of rusher. He's more of a speed rusher than a power rusher, and that's interesting when you talk about age, and he's getting up there. He's going to be 31 this year. He'll turn 31 in the middle of the season in October. So how long does he continue to win with the speed? But he's a guy that can win with power, too. He's a relentless worker. He's starting to reinvent his game. You saw it before he got hurt last year where he was starting to move around a little bit more on the formation. This is still a really good player. His pass rushing productivity fell last year, but I think a lot of it was due to injuries. And I think, the Steelers are going to look at him and say, we know TJ Watt's going to be a really good player. And while there's risk involved in this deal when he's 33, 34, because you never know how guys are going to age, he's still a really good player right now. The Steelers want to be serious about winning this year, and it seems like certainly they will and are serious about winning this year. He's got to be one of those guys that's around. And so I think he's a really good player still, and the Steelers believe that.
So yesterday, when this trade news broke, Minkah Fitzpatrick to Miami for Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith, and some swapped picks. What did you make of it? I would imagine this was a surprising deal for Steeler people.
The Jalen Ramsey stuff had been around. Obviously, the Jonnu Smith stuff had been around for a month. And it wasn't surprising the Steelers landed Ramsey and Smith. It was the real surprising part was Minkah Fitzpatrick going out in the deal. Yeah. I mean, I don't think any of us could have envisioned them trading Minkah Fitzpatrick. And I understand why they did it. The splash plays aren't there. The high salary for a guy that doesn't make the splash plays with his salary at safety, I get it. But this guy is a locker room leader. He's essentially the stalwart of your secondary. He is a huge part of the locker room dynamics. And the Steelers just generally don't let guys that are locker room leaders like that walk. They don't trade guys like that. We've seen a lot of uncharacteristic Steelers-like moves this year the DK Metcalf trade. This one's the most on Steelers-like yet. I thought maybe they would trade for Ramsey or Smith, and it would be future draft picks. I think that was a fair kind of ask. Could they have traded a day 3 pick for Jalen Ramsey and then maybe another day 3 pick and gotten Johnny Smith? I think that's something that maybe you thought about. Trading Minkah Fitzpatrick back in that deal was the shocking part of it. And so I think that's really what the shocking part about it was. But then you looked at it, and the Steelers added a weapon for Aaron Rodgers offensively. They need more weapons offensively. And they got a really versatile chess piece in Jalen Ramsey that allows them to do a lot of things they haven't been able to do in a long time. And so it got better, I think, as a team, but it was a bit shocking that they ended up trading somebody like Minkah Fitzpatrick just because of what he meant to the organization and historical moves with guys of that stature.
So why do you think they are behaving a bit out of character?
They are desperate for a playoff win. I think that is what I'm saying here, and what I think everyone should say is because the Steelers are a franchise that is used to winning in the playoffs, even when they aren't the height of success at the quarterback position. You got the 90s. I mean, they went to the Super Bowl with Neil O'Donnell. This is a team that is known for winning, and when they don't win in the playoffs, it stings. They haven't won a playoff game since 2017. It's been a long time for the Steelers. Mike Tomlin isn't a guy that in the outside noise and know how he kind of factors things in, but if you don't think he's feeling the pressure of a playoff win, he needs to get off his back. He needs to get it off his back, because every time it feels like we look at the Steelers and their season, Den's the same way. Something slightly over 500, or maybe they even have a really good season like they did in 2020, and then it comes crashing down and they get crushed in the playoffs. And that has just been too typical for the Steelers, and they're tired of it. And so they're making large-scale changes. Quarterback room,
We're going to try
all of them. The entire quarterback room gets changed, and then you bring in guys like Ramsey and Rodgers and Metcalf. That's kind of what they're doing.
Nick, your phone's a little bit in and out. I'm going to have Max try to reestablish just a better connection, because I want to continue the conversation with you. So, Max, see if we can get Nick to be on in a clearer spot. Yeah, it is incredible that Pittsburgh's last playoff win was against Alex Smith and the Kansas City Chiefs on the road at Arrowhead back in January of 2017. It was the 2016 season, and then they got blown out in the AFC title game by the Patriots. Remember that incredible game against Jacksonville, who was a great defensive team in 2017, and they lost 45-42. Jacksonville went on and almost beat the Patriots in the AFC title game. And then really Roethlisberger's health became an issue even as he quarterbacked games in the postseason. But yeah, I mean, think about we went 20 years without a playoff win. But this is the Steelers. They're coming up on 10 football seasons, 9 anyway, without a playoff win. And just to hear Nick say they're going for a playoff win is an interesting thing for a franchise the stature of the Steelers. Do we have Nick back? Max, do we have him back? We're still working on getting him back. Max will let me know when we have Nick back.
We got Nick back. We should be good now.
Okay. All right. Nick is back. I was just going through the list. I mean, when you said they're just looking for a playoff win, I just made a note, and I'm like, God, that's Pittsburgh talking. They're just looking for a playoff win. And you are in a conference, right, where I think anybody reasonably objective would say, Buffalo, KC, Baltimore are the top 3. Pittsburgh may be vying for the 4th best team in the conference. So let's go to just sort of what the team looks like, because I think Jonnu Smith is a great addition, and Ramsey as well, especially with his versatility. What is the feeling in Pittsburgh? We're still 2 months away from the beginning of the regular season, about what they can be this year with Aaron Rodgers.
Well, I think they can break this spell. I think they can be the best team they've had since 2016, 2015-ish. I think that's what they think. And this is a team that, I talk about playoff win, but really it's a playoff run. The Steelers are used to playoff runs. And even if it's a tough conference, they're the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's that simple. They don't have a quarterback necessarily that I think you could point to and say they're going to go toe for toe with guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Patrick Mahomes week in and week out. But can Rodgers go on a run of that type? I think that's something that they'll look at. But really, it's kind of interesting because they've kind of dual-wielded this play for this year, but also go for next year in terms of the future, because they're going to trade up next year for a quarterback. They've hoarded assets in the 2026 NFL draft, and they're going to try and get their long-term peaks next year. And so this year, it's kind of like, let's throw together as many pieces as we can. Let's get a lot of stars, surround this team with as many talented players as we can, and let's try and make a run at it. And so there's a vibe in Pittsburgh, in that building, that they are undoubtedly better than they were last year, and they can make a serious run at this thing. And that's what Pittsburgh is looking at and saying, we made these moves because we think we're going to be better, and we're not just going to lose in the wild card. We might win a wild card and a divisional round game, make it to the AFC Championship game, and that's what they think they can do. And really, I think Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan look at the team, and they think they're Super Bowl contenders. But the Steelers need to have a modicum of playoff success first. They need to start building this culture back up. They need to start building the success back up, because it's been dormant in Pittsburgh for far too long.
I'm really interested in the Steelers this year. I think a lot of NFL fans are. But I might be in the minority here, but I thought Aaron Rodgers at times last year actually looked like Aaron Rodgers. Maybe not the MVP version, but towards the end of the year, he had some excellent games and looked like the Aaron Rodgers, like at least at the worst, a top half of the league starting quarterback. And so I am very bullish personally that the quarterback situation, unless he really falls off a cliff, and that's always possible, at 41 years old, but I'm convinced that the quarterback situation is going to be the best since since Ben played healthy. Is the majority opinion, or where is the opinion on what kind of quarterback Rodgers will be for Pittsburgh in 2025?
Yeah, I think inside the org, it is that they are going to try and support him. They're not going to expect him to be the 4-time MVP. What they are going to be is better than Russell and Justin Fields were last year. So they're expecting somewhere around the 15th best quarterback in the league, which I think is realistic for him. And what they're going to look at is say, our offensive line is young. They're going to be better. We're going to surround Smith as one of those weapons. DK Metcalf. They figured out George Pickens. I don't necessarily think they're done adding weapons. I could see them adding a guy like a Gabe Davis, who's still on the free agent market. And I think they're going to surround him with this talent. They're going to get to the run game, make sure he has a run game, run a lot of play action, and they're going to try and take a lot off him. They're going to give him a really good defense. Obviously, he already has a great front four with what they've added there this offseason. And then they get a big-time player on the back end in Jalen Ramsey. And so the Steelers are building this up to say, all right, Aaron, we don't need you to be the superstar you once were, but can you take us there? Can you be the point guard type to take us there? And then when we need those moments of magic, can we maybe get a little bit out of you? I think that's what they're doing here. And so that type of player for the Steelers would be the best quarterback they've had since Ben Roethlisberger was healthy. It would be the best quarterback they've had in 5 to 6 years. And the Steelers are looking at quarterback play that they needed for years and saying, we didn't need somebody that could carry us necessarily. We needed somebody that could just drive the car essentially there. And that's what they think Aaron Rodgers can do. And so that's what they're going to give him. They're going to give him support, and they're going to hope that he can get them there and be the driver of their playoff success.
What's the early word? And we're talking right now with Nick from the Pittsburgh Steelers podcast in Pittsburgh. What is the early word on one of my favorite running backs in the draft, Caleb Johnson?
Yeah, the Steelers love Caleb Johnson, and I love Caleb Johnson. You watch him work. He's a tireless worker. He's detail-oriented. He's a perfect fit for Arthur Smith's offense in terms of the actual zone running ability. I mean, you talk about outside zone, wide zone runners. He's as natural as it gets. His weakness is in pass pro and as a receiver, but he's worked tirelessly on both those issues. I mean, he's talked with Jalen Warren. He's going this offseason to work with Aaron Rodgers out in Malibu and work on his receiving chops. This is a guy that has done the extra mile. When nobody is watching, he's working still. He's in the film room, working relentlessly. This is a guy that looks like an NFL running back already. He's built like one. It's not like he needs to get in a weight room and build up his body for a year. This is a guy that already is built like an NFL running back and could be a bell cow type of NFL running back. And so he is a really, really fun player, I think. And the Steelers, I think, are going to try and catapult him as quickly as they can to starting running back status. I do think Jaylen Warren is a guy that they really like, but I just think they're so high on him. And the early indications from what the Steelers think is they think this guy could be a star. So we'll see if that ends up panning out, but that's the high expectations that they have for this kid.
Yeah, I actually thought that they were better at times last year with Jaylen Warren getting carries than Najee Harris. I thought they were more explosive. Did you agree with that?
No doubt about it. They were more explosive. They were better in the passing game. Jaylen Warren is kind of the Austin Eckler to the Melvin Gordon. If you remember that back in L.A. with the Chargers a few years ago, I think it's a very similar situation. Now, Warren's not going to get the Eckler workload that Austin Eckler ended up getting, and I think the Steelers don't want him to because he's been banged up a little bit, and they don't know if he can necessarily shoulder that type of load, but he's a really good 1A to a 1B. If Caleb Johnson's as good as you think he can be, Jaylen Warren can easily be the complement to that. And, I think the smart thing that they might do this offseason is try to extend Jaylen Warren and create that 1-2 punch for the future. And Warren is just more explosive. He's a great tackle breaker. He just bounces off of tackles. He's got that Doug Martin, Maurice Jones-Drew type build because he's just 5'8", 220 pounds of muscle. For that guy that size, he shouldn't be that good at breaking tackles and just bouncing off guys and being a pass protector like that. And they were a better offense when Jaylen Warren was out there. And as a pure runner, he's just more explosive than Najee Harris. And the type of offense that they had last year was so explosive oriented, right? It was just these moon balls by Russell Wilson down the sideline that not having that efficient rushing attack really hurt them. And Najee Harris just didn't fit the scheme either. He's a downhill runner. He's a gap runner. He fits what they do in Los Angeles a lot better. He'll fit much better in the Greg Roman offense than he will in the Arthur Smith offense. And so it just fits much better with what Jaylen Warren does. So I think it should be a really good trade for the Steelers because I also think Caleb Johnson's just a great fit for them.
All right, two more for Nick Farabaugh from Steelers beat reporter for Penn Live and host of the Steelers Breakdown podcast. Just because we reside in the NFC East, I just want your thoughts on what Dallas is getting with George Pickens.
Well, I think they're getting an extremely talented receiver who, while statistically didn't have his best season last year, did have his best season last year. You watch the tape, he became a better route runner. He had more routes in his tree last year. He was just a better player overall than he ever was before. He was more consistent. But they are getting a guy that can be a little bit hot-headed, and that's kind of what he is. He's a guy that didn't show up for a lot of meetings. He was late to games. His off-the-field prep, he works hard. I don't think that's a question. It's just the focus, the week in and week out dependency on that guy. The Steelers decided they couldn't trust him. You look at some of his antics on the field last year. I look back to that Thursday night game in Cleveland where on the Hail Mary play, he's brawling with Greg Newsome in the back of the end
snow.
Right. And that's not a great sign. I remember in Cincinnati, he's fighting with fans, even though the Steelers are going off. He pulls down Jordan Lewis of the Cowboys when they lose last year against them. He's putting in half effort on his routes at times when he's not featured in the offense. There's just signs over the years that this guy on the field and off the field is not a dependent receiver. You can't trust him. And so the Steelers decided they couldn't trust him. They weren't going to pay him $25, maybe even $30 million per year. And so I think he's going to have a really good year next to CeeDee Lamb. He's a really good player. It's just when things get tough, George Pickens usually also festers up. And so I would imagine that we will have some drama there, even though he'll be quite good on the field for them.
All right. Nick has told us that he believes TJ Watt will get re-signed, extended by the Steelers, probably right before the season begins. I'm with you on that. I think he is a Steeler. I think Terry McLaurin is a Washington Commander in 2025. But if I told you that he did get traded before the season began, what would Pittsburgh need to get back to deal TJ Watt?
I think they would optimistically hope they'd get a first-round pick, but he's a 30-year-old, going to be 31-year-old edge rusher that's going to want $40 million per year. So will they get that? I don't know. I think there will be a lot of competition. I think teams like the Packers would be in on that. I think the Eagles would probably still be in on that because they're the Eagles. There's a lot of different teams I think that would hop into that. And so I think if you're realistically hoping, first-round pick is where you would shoot. But where would they actually get? I think a second-round pick plus another day 2 pick could work. You could do a 26 second and a 27 third, something like that. Second and a fourth, something like that, I think could work as well for the Steelers. Or they could look at players. I think that's another thing. Could they maybe use him as a trade chip to go get the wide receiver answer? I mean, they drafted Jack Sawyer this year at edge rusher. Nick Herbig's a very good player. So if they did trade TJ Watt, I mean, they still have starting level edge rushers behind him. So it's not disaster, even though you're losing a star. But I do think the Steelers would look and say, we'd at least want a second-round pick. And so I think that would be the baseline. Second-round plus change, whether that be another pick, a wide receiver to try and fill that void, or maybe even a safety now that they trade Micah Fitzpatrick. Something like that, I think, is where they would come in. But I think the minimum would be that second-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, I always say, Nick, that this is what we get wrong more than anything else, trade compensation, because there's a lot involved in what you just described. Somebody's going to have to pay him, close to $35 million a year with a lot guaranteed. And so that plays into it in a big way as well. Hey, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Yep. Nick Farabaugh from the Steelers Breakdown podcast, and he's a beat reporter for Penn Live. And the phone got much better there over the last 10 minutes. Yeah, I mean, the Steelers are such an interesting team heading into this year. Such an interesting team. It's going to come down to, as much as they're trying to build around him and take the pressure off him, bottom line is Aaron Rodgers is going to have to play at a very high level for Pittsburgh to win more than just one playoff game, because the 3 best teams in the conference have the 3 best quarterbacks: Mahomes, Allen, and Jackson. And by the way, didn't even mention clearly Burrow would be in that conversation as well. But they've got a nice team, I think, around them. And I don't think TJ Watt's going anywhere. Speaking of TJ Watt, that's what we're going to talk about next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. From All Flats on Twitter, Kevin, so the missing piece is a player like TJ Watt, and you'd trade Terry for him, and then suddenly the missing piece is an impact wide receiver. And then he adds a laughing, sideways, tears coming out of the eyes emoji. Yeah, I would think about it for sure. It's not. Let's just make sure we all understand. This is like a major reach hypothetical. I think the odds are stacked heavily, like 90% plus, that TJ Watt is a Pittsburgh Steeler with an extended contract in 2025, and Terry McLaurin is a Washington Commander in 2025 with a contract extension as well. Look, All Flats, I don't want to trade Terry for him. I'd rather trade something else, picks for TJ Watt. We just talked about the conversation that we had about a week ago in which we put out a poll. Would you, without considering the picks that would be involved, because you'd probably have to give up, a third or a fourth rounder with Terry to get TJ Watt. Would you be okay if Terry McLaurin were a Pittsburgh Steeler in 2025 and TJ Watt were a Washington player in 2025? And overwhelmingly, 75% said, no, I want Terry. I don't want TJ Watt. I totally disagree with that. If you told me that was a way to get TJ Watt and that's my only choice, yeah, of course I would do it. TJ Watt's a top 15, top 11, top 12 player in the league. Terry's a top 75 player in the league, maybe a top 50 player in the league. Whatever list you want to go. TJ Watt is a game-changing defensive end. He's one of the 3, 4, 5 best defensive players in the game. Okay. Terry's a top 10-ish wide receiver in the game. But I wouldn't want to trade Terry. I'd rather acquire TJ Watt in another way. It's not like we're flush with picks. Remember, the second rounder in 2026 was part of the Laramie Tunsil deal. The fourth rounder in 2026 was part of the Laramie Tunsil deal. I think you got a first, third, fifth, sixth, and seventh right now, so you only have 5 picks in the upcoming draft. You've got a full allotment in 2027, but those future picks get discounted. But I'd much rather be looking at, a pick for TJ Watt. Yeah, it'd be great if you could deal a third rounder in next year's draft, a fifth rounder in next year's draft, and maybe the second rounder in 2027, something like that. But TJ Watt would be the missing piece, if you believe that there is a missing piece. But yes, that's what's missing, is a dominant defensive, havoc-wreaking, game-changing defensive player, specifically a pass rusher. And yes, I believe run stopping is the most important thing in the upcoming season. He helps you there too. I just, Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, and TJ Watt have been conversations this summer for our team, in part because our team lacks a player like that. And 2025, almost overnight last year, became a we can win the Super Bowl season, the first we've had in many lifetimes around here, and the first for people like me in 30 plus years. So yeah, TJ Watt in a Washington uniform, are you kidding me? Yeah, that's interesting to me, more than interesting. And I don't find it funny at all, actually, the idea of needing an impact wide receiver versus needing an impact pass rusher / defensive game wrecker. I don't equate the two the same way. A defensive game wrecker is more valuable than an impact wide receiver, in my opinion. 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. What would you be willing to give up for TJ Watt? All right, we're not going to do the swapping Terry for TJ. We did that last week. I understand. Our fan base, for some reason, wouldn't do it. That's fine. You got your answer on that one. What would you be willing to give up for TJ Watt if he were actually available, which I don't think he will be? but it's July 1st. And Adam Schefter says teams are certainly snooping around. Whether or not Pittsburgh takes those calls or not, I have no idea. Somebody mentioned to me this morning on ESPN's Greenberg show that they did a segment, what would be the best fit not named Pittsburgh for TJ Watt. And of the 3 people on the set, 2 said Washington and 1 said Green Bay. I don't know who was on the set this morning, but 2 said Washington's the obvious, and 1 said Green Bay would be a really good fit. So, question, what would you be willing to give up for TJ Watt? So, my answer to that would be the preference would be, this is what you would be willing to give up, all right? So the most you'd be willing to give up, right? It's not the ideal trade. You do have to take into consideration, you have to pay this player. You've got to give him $35 million a year, somewhere in that neighborhood, all right? And by the way, if Terry's not a part of the deal, you got to pay Terry as well. Washington has the cap space. They've got the future cap space. They are all in on taking advantage of Jaden Daniels' rookie deal. By the way, the guest that we had on, Nick, said it kind of feels like a Philly kind of a deal. Yeah, let's not have him land in Philly or Detroit or Green Bay. That wouldn't be great. I'd rather see him traded to, I don't know, the Raiders. I don't know if Pittsburgh would trade him in the AFC. Probably not within the division for sure, or to a true contender like a Buffalo, as an example. Didn't they sign Joey Bosa in the offseason?
Yes,
I think
they did.
Yeah. So they probably wouldn't be interested, although Watt's much better than Bosa and typically more available than Bosa. What would you be willing to give up? All right. What would be the max you'd be willing to give up for TJ Watt? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. I'm really very open to this. And before I get all you want to do is just trade, and swing big. Well, that's not true and hasn't been true. It was true about quarterbacks. But typically I passed on the swing big unless it was a quarterback until this year, until this offseason, because they actually have the quarterback now. And they have an opportunity in the NFC with what I believe to be the best quarterback in the conference to compete for a Super Bowl appearance out of the NFC. Last year was proof that they are not that far away. What held them up last year? What prevented them from playing more competitively in the NFC Championship game against the Philadelphia Eagles? Defense. They just didn't have a good enough defense. So TJ Watt, I am 100% sure, would make the defense improved significantly. You'd have, for the first time in a long time, a player that would keep offensive coordinators awake at night leading into the game. So my preference would be something like what I described. The 3rd and 5th rounder that they have in the 2026, and then you give up a 2nd rounder in 2027. Something like that. Understanding that you're not going to have to give up multiple firsts for a guy that you're going to have to pay $35 million plus to for, 3 years minimum. So something like that, I'd be more than willing to give up. Would I be willing to give up a 1st rounder next year? Just a straight 1st rounder for TJ Watt? Yeah, I'd seriously consider it. As I've said before, we get hung up way too often on players that we don't have any clue about, which typically more times than not in the NFL draft is a 2/3 swing and a miss. You're not swinging and missing on TJ Watt. And the window number 1, Jaden Daniels rookie deal, is right now. So would I consider just flat out next year's 1st rounder for Watt? Yes, I would. I'd be willing to do that, especially understanding that more likely than not, it's going to be a late 1st round pick. For TJ Watt, yeah, I think that's the most I'd be willing to consider in terms of the picks. I like my idea of a third, fifth, and a future second, maybe a little bit more because that second's discounted because it's not 26, it's 27. So it's more like 2/3 and a fifth you're giving up, in terms of overall value. But I would give up a first rounder for TJ Watt, much more so than I would for Trey Hendrickson, which we talked about. I would not give up a first and a third for Trey Hendrickson. I was always into, let's make it a second and a fourth. This was before the Tunsil trade, or a second and a third, something like that for Trey Hendrickson. TJ Watt is an infinitely better all-around player than Trey Hendrickson. So I'd be willing to give that up. If it became a player deal and Pittsburgh would only do it for Terry, Terry and a fifth rounder, something like that, I would certainly consider it. Yes, I would. But my preference would be to keep Terry, obviously, and add TJ Watt. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. What's the most you'd be willing to give up for TJ Watt? Max will give us his answer when we come back. Phone lines are open. 301-230-0980. Let me mention that Window Nation wants to make your home more comfortable if you've got older windows. If you're struggling with humidity, even with your air conditioning on full blast, it's high time to replace your old windows. Right now, Window Nation is offering their best deal of the year. 50% off on all windows and all window styles with no interest until the year 2030. That's right, 0% interest for 5 whole years. Plus, they'll finish the job in one day with their installers that have an average of 16 years of experience. So they come in, they're done in a day or less. You're back to your normal routine and you're getting relief from the summer heat. Every summer, we end up with these, incredible stretches of heat and humidity. Older windows are costing you big time on your air conditioning bills. Call Window Nation today, 866-90-NATION, or visit them at windownation.com right now to get your free quote, which includes 50% off and no interest until the year 2030. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com.
All right, big news day around the league as the former Raiders and Giants tight end Darren Waller has come out of retirement and is being traded to the Miami Dolphins. Waller recently informed the Giants of his desire to play, but only in Miami. Now, the Milwaukee Bucks are releasing Damian Lillard to make space to acquire Miles Turner, who signed a 4-year deal. And the reigning MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, signs a 4-year deal worth $285 million, giving him the largest annual salary in NBA history. The NHL free agency also continues. Cap signed 25-year-old defenseman Declan Chisholm to a 2-year deal yesterday. And today, this morning even, Martin Fehervary has reached a deal to stay in Washington, signing a 7-year deal worth up to $42 million. That's $6 million a year. Tonight, the Nats return from their West Coast road trip to take on the Detroit Tigers. Jack Flaherty takes the bump against Trevor Williams. First pitch will be at 6:45. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 6:15. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1 and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
All right. Simple question. If you were Adam Peters, what's the most you'd be willing to give up for TJ Watt? If the Steelers literally started taking calls and they were at least open to the possibility of moving TJ Watt, what's the most you'd be willing to give up for TJ Watt? 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. Let me emphasize, I don't think TJ Watt's going to get traded. I don't think Terry McLaurin's going to get traded. I don't think Trey Hendrickson's going to get traded. I think all of these players are going to end up with their current teams on new deals. I guess it is possible, and I would say it's more possible with Terry than anybody else that he would play in 2025 on his existing deal, which has 1 year left on it. I don't see TJ Watt doing that, and I don't see Trey Hendrickson doing that. But I think ultimately these teams, all three of them, for different reasons, view 2025 as a massive opportunity year. Pittsburgh, because they've got 1 year of a 41-year-old quarterback. Washington, because they're trying to leverage a rookie contract superstar, situation. And in Cincinnati, let's face it, paying both Chase and Higgins, they won 9 games last year. And remember, at the end of last year, anybody watching the NFL at the end of last year would have said, if Cincinnati gets in, they're dangerous. Like, you wouldn't want to play them. They won their final 5 games of the year last year to get to 9-8. They were still alive, I think, heading into the final week of the season. They had that big game in the next to last season against Denver, I think it was, that they won. But they were a borderline impossible team to slow down and to stop from scoring pretty much any number that they wanted to get to. And they didn't get there. And they didn't get there because they sucked defensively all season long. But there's a feeling in Cincinnati, we paid Chase, we paid Higgins, we gave you Joe what you needed. We're trying to get Hendrickson. We're trying to upgrade the defense. They took that, poke, I think a long odds, selection on Shamar Stewart. I mean, the guy hasn't even suited up for a mini camp day. Cincinnati's difficult to deal with, that organization. But you've got 3 organizations that feel like they got a chance. So TJ Watt and Terry McLaurin and Trey Hendrickson, I don't think are going anywhere. But if Adam Schefter, who suggested maybe at some point he could become available, if he became available, what would be the most you would be willing, or you'd want Adam Peters to give up for TJ Watt? I suggested a package. Look, a first rounder next year, I would do it. I would. That first rounder is going to be late. You may not have to give up a first round pick because you're going to have to pay him. So a combination of what you have, like a third and a fifth rounder, and then a second rounder in 2027, something like that, something in the, realm of the Laramie Tunsil deal, which was, hold on, let me get the exact, what was the exact compensation? Sorry. It was a package of picks. It was a third rounder, a seventh rounder, a second rounder, and a fourth rounder for Tunsil, and a fourth rounder back. Something in the area of that. You didn't have to pay Tunsil this year, although it's going to be better to pay him sooner rather than later. But I'd be willing to give up a hell of a lot for TJ Watt. What about you, Max?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely, of course, if anytime you're afforded the opportunity to trade for a perennial all-pro like TJ, you're going to jump at the chance. But finding the compensation is always tricky because you got to make everyone happy and you have to get the team to say yes. So finding something that they're a little bit deficient on is always helpful. So they're obviously going to be losing TJ as a weak side linebacker. And I'm not going to throw Frankie Louvu in the deal because I want to see what TJ Watt and Frankie Louvu could do. But defensive line, they're not crazy deep, especially on the interior. So a guy like maybe Deron Payne or a Johnny Newton, maybe could probably get the deal done. But if you're going to do that, probably Deron Payne and maybe a third, or or Johnny Newton and a first. But that Johnny Newton and a first is a way bigger package than Deron Payne and a third, especially with the upside.
Well, you're trading at that point a first and a second, your second rounder from last year.
Right.
G from the shop. I'd trade the Steelers a second and third round pick today for Watt, and I would cut Tomlin's grass for the rest of the summer.
Sounds like a good deal.
That would be a good deal. I would be willing to, trade a second and a third rounder and have you, G, cut Tomlin's grass for the rest of the summer. All right. Phone lines are now open. 301-230-0980. What would you be willing to give up for TJ Watt? What should Adam Peters max be willing to give up for TJ Watt? Let's go to DC. DC, go ahead.
Great day, Kevin.
Hey, DC, man, what's up, man?
You make all as well. You make it hard for me to even make a point because our points are very similar. But I would definitely, the max I would give up was next year's first. And that being said, I would still try to get like a third or fourth round pick back from Pittsburgh in that trade. And I wouldn't give them more than a 2-year deal. I know you mentioned a 3-year deal, and I know a lot of times that's voidable. But I would just give him a 2-year deal because I know Jaden's contract will be coming up, and we should be able to see what he's got these 2 years and help us the most in that time because he'll be that much overdue.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. A 2-year deal would be interesting. Like he's going to turn 31. Myles Garrett's 29, got a 4-year deal. I mean, Danielle Hunter last year in the same situation. Remember, got a 2-year deal at $35.5 million per year. I don't know if you get him for 2 years unless you really, guarantee almost all of it and let him become a free agent in 2 years. But yeah, the contract part is a big part of what the compensation would be. I think we understand that. Thanks, DC. Appreciate it.
Okay,
301. Yep. 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. Several of you, by the way, have tweeted nothing if it involves Terry. But like Max, some of you have suggested other players like Deron Payne. Deron Payne and this year or next year's third, which they have, would that be, or next year's second, would that be a possibility? Maybe next year's, I'm sorry, not next year's second, next year's third. They don't have a second next year. They don't have a second and a fourth, both of those in the Tunsil deal. Deron Payne and a third for Watt, and then you got to pay Watt. Sign me up for that. And I love Deron, but TJ Watt is, a given. Deron right now is a bit of a mystery. I don't think there's any doubt about it. All right. If you want to weigh in, we do have to get to a break. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. What I'm looking for is if you were Washington's GM, if you are playing GM, if you're playing Adam Peters and TJ Watt legitimately came on the market, A, would you be interested? And then B, what is the most you'd be willing to give up for one of the best 3 or 4 defensive players in the game? 301-230-0980. NBA free agency's underway. We know that. There have been some big deals, including a massive deal today. We'll get to that. And how about Caitlyn Clark and where she got voted among her peers in terms of the best guards in the WNBA? I've never seen a pettier group of people than these WNBA players. Got a lot to go on the show. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. Wow, big deal in the NBA. NBA free agency got underway last night. Miles Turner leaving Indianapolis for Milwaukee. A $107 million deal for 4 years. Miles Turner was a massive impact on Indiana's run. Man, the NBA, it just changes. This time of year, you just get so many changes. And for me, I don't know about how many of you feel the same way, but I don't even realize it after these few days until we get to, late in the season and into the postseason. And it's like, oh, yeah, I forgot Miles Turner left Indiana. He's going to play for Milwaukee. 107 for 4 years, $107 million to go play with the Bucks. But the Bucks are waiving Damian Lillard. My question to you, Max, and you follow this even more closely than I do, will Giannis be happy about this or not?
I've already seen plenty of reports saying that he is not happy about the Bucks moving on from Damian Lillard.
Because he wanted Lillard to stay?
I would assume that would be why, yeah.
I mean, didn't he tear his Achilles? I mean, when's he?
Yeah,
he's done,
that's
isn't
the
he?
thing. Yeah, he'd be done he'd basically do the exact same thing that Jason Tatum's probably going to do and sit out the entire season. So we're going to have no Dame, no Tatum, no Halliburton. And I don't know why Giannis is going to be he's going to throw his weight around for sure, because that's just the type of guy that Giannis has proven to be in Milwaukee. But I really don't think Giannis is ever going to leave unless they force his hand. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I guess. I mean, SGA, the league MVP, the finals MVP, also signed one of those supermax contract extensions, 4 years, $285 million for SGA. Meantime, I don't know if you guys are following this story, this NBA story. Bradley Beal, remember old Brad? God, I used to take some heat when I would suggest that Bradley Beal was best case, a number 2 on a contending team, but really more a number 3 on a contending team. And that Supermax is way too much money, and you need to trade him and that contract now. He's just too inconsistent on the defensive end, too casual. He just was never your lead guy. He was never really even the number 2 on a true championship team, in my opinion. He is due to make in Phoenix this year $53 million, actually over $53 million, $53.66 million. Bradley Beal is projected to make, or will make, this year with Phoenix. He's also got the no trade clause. Then he has a player option in 2026, 2027 for $57.1 million. You think he'll pick it up? You think Bradley Beal will pick up that player option for $57.1 million next year? Wow. Phoenix has really operated in a poor way, but Washington didn't trade him in time, but they did get rid of him, and they got rid of him, thankfully, and aren't on the hook for $53 and $57 million. But Bradley Beal's career is flaming out, man, in a major way. He is I think he just turned 32 years old. And I don't know where he goes. I mean, he's got a no trade clause. You would think that Phoenix might just say, we're done with you. You can't trade Bradley Beal. The other thing is you can't trade LeBron James right now for different reasons. LeBron's 40 years old, and he's picked up his player option at $52.5 million. Nobody's going to trade for LeBron in that contract for 1 year. I don't think they would. I don't even know if anybody would be interested in Bradley Beal at this point in his career. But if they are interested, they're certainly not interested at $53.6 million this year and $57.1 million next year. What does Phoenix do with Bradley Beal? Holy God. He makes up 34% of their cap next year. Whew. That's brutal. NBA contracts are insane. And Bradley Beal did lead the league in scoring in 2020, 2021, one of those 2 years. Unbelievable. What does Phoenix do with Bradley Beal, Max? What do they do with him?
Dude, I have no idea. Like, it's at the point where you just kind of have to cut bait as soon as you possibly can. If you ever can, just let him sit there. There's really just it's a winless scenario. Now, Brian and I were kicking around this idea since the money matches, you could trade Bradley Beal for LeBron James, but that would probably make more headlines than like a nuclear bomb going off somewhere. So it probably would never happen. But I have no idea.
LeBron James is much better off playing with Luka than Devin Booker.
For sure.
So I know you were tongue in cheek on that, but LeBron's not going to Phoenix to play for that, because I was reading something yesterday, after this Durant trade, that they want to move on from Jalen Green. They think he's overpaid. They just traded,
think he's
for him as part of the Durant deal.
Apparently negotiating an extension with Devin Booker again.
Yeah,
man, I don't know what goes on in Phoenix. There must be some good stuff out there, because my God, things suck at the basketball department.
I just can't believe. I mean, Bradley Beal's career, Ted gave him the Supermax deal after he made that All-NBA third team. I think it was the year that he led the league in scoring. Gave him a no-trade clause, which was just a massive mistake. And Bradley Beal just was never what Ted really wanted him to be, or Tommy Shepard for that matter, because Tommy was the general manager in the moment, I believe, when they gave him that deal. I think it was Tommy Shepard, not Ernie Grunfeld. I could be wrong about that. But Bradley Beal's career has flamed out. And, he missed, 30 games in his first year in Phoenix. He missed, basically close to 30 games this year with injuries. He averaged, 18 points his first year, 17 this past season. He's just an okay player. I mean, Bradley Beal at his best was a really good scorer, but he was just never, ever a number one. And if he was a number two, it wasn't on a championship contender. It was on a playoff team as a number two, but not on a championship contender. And look, he went there as a number three. It was the perfect scenario had everybody stayed healthy and the team had come together with Durant and Booker, because Durant and Booker much better than Bradley Beal. But he was, in essence, the number three in that first season when he got there, behind Durant and Booker. I'm trying to think who else they had on that team. That was probably it in terms of their scores on that Phoenix team. But Bradley Beal, now 32 years old. Bradley Beal's got to find, he can't find a spot for this kind of money. I mean, I'm not sure there's a worse contract in the NBA right now than Bradley Beal making $53 and then $57 million in the next 2 years. He's got to find one of those situations where he finds a good team, a playoff team, maybe a deep, into the playoff team where he can come off the bench and be, points off the bench, not required to get 23 a night, required to get 16, off the bench in 28 to 30 minutes, something like that. Not the star, but he's going to give them absolute scoring off the bench when they go to the bench against the other team's backups. That's what Bradley Beal has to find his way towards. I always liked Bradley Beal. I mean, first-rate guy, kick back to the community. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot going on with the wife and the whole thing, but Certainly not a bad guy by any stretch of the imagination, but just not the player the Wizards believed him to be. And for that matter, what Phoenix thought he was. Wow, they are stuck because that's an untradeable contract. I can't imagine anybody saying, I mean, they'd cut him and it'd be, they would cut him and pick up his contract. No one needs to trade for him, if they don't want him on the team. We'll see how that plays out. Interesting. So free agency underway. Not, the most exciting of NBA free agent starts, that's for sure. We saw a big trade yesterday with Denver moving on from Michael Porter Jr. Dealing for Cam Johnson in Brooklyn. I think Cam Johnson gives him better defense. I think it's a better contract for Denver. He gives him the scoring. Porter Jr., another contract that just doesn't match the player or the player's availability and health. Denver's going to be, to me, an interesting story in the NBA next year because right now in the West, it's OKC and Houston. I think in terms of the two best teams, that's the way I would view it. And then I would go to Denver. I would go to Denver next. Denver, remember, had a really good shot to eliminate OKC in the second round. They were up 2-1. They had a 9-point lead in game 4 into the fourth quarter. That was the crucial loss. They had a shot to win game 5 against Oklahoma City and went to a game 7 and just ran out of gas. Remember, Gordon was hurt and Michael Porter Jr. was basically hurt for the entire series, but Aaron Gordon got hurt late in that series, and that was a major factor. But Denver's making some moves here. They're bringing Bruce Brown back. They made the move for Cam Johnson. That's the way I would see it right now in the West. OKC 1, Houston a close second, and Denver third. Max, that's the way I would see it. In the East, if you tell me Tatum's gone for the year, then it's Knicks, it's Pacers, I guess, and Cavs. Who am I missing from that list? Is Detroit making progress? Is Atlanta making progress in free agency?
So I can't give you more details, but I do know that Shams has used the word cooking when referring to the Atlanta Hawks. So
yeah,
people around the league have really liked what they've been doing this offseason.
Right.
But other than that, I mean, it would be, the Pistons, Pacers, Knicks, Cavs, but Pacers aren't going to have Halliburton. Celtics aren't going to have Tatum. So that's probably where how it's going to look.
Of course, the Pacers too without Halliburton, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the East is kind of wide open.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting year in the NBA.
Houston with the Durant trade, with the Dorian Finney-Smith acquisition. Houston with Amen Thompson, the way he played in the postseason. That's the team that I look at and say they're the number one threat to Oklahoma City. Because one of the things that I would suggest is Oklahoma City was still feeling their way as a young basketball team through the rigors of an NBA postseason. And they got there and they closed it out, in a game 7 in which Tyrese Halliburton got hurt. We understand that. But I would not be surprised if they are a better team next year. They're going to have to be better on offense. They're going to have to improve offensively. And that's not just with player production. That's coaches. And that's coaching. They've got to become a little bit more disciplined in half-court offensive basketball when they get to the postseason next year. I don't see any scenario, even if the Lakers bring in DeAndre Ayton. I'm not an Ayton guy, that the Lakers can contend with the teams that I just mentioned. OKC 1, Houston 2, Denver 3. You know me, I think the Clippers are always interesting if you get Kawhi Leonard back to where he was at the end of the year and into the postseason. He was Kawhi Leonard again. I just can't stand James Harden, and Harden got signed to an extension. And then they added Brook Lopez to the team. It's going to be interesting in the NBA next year. I mean, we haven't even mentioned Minnesota and Golden State. Minnesota was in the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago and won a series over the Lakers to get to that next spot against OKC this year. So you had essentially 2 straight years of Western Conference Finals for Minnesota. I didn't even mention them, and I should have. Wow, the West is loaded when you think about it. All right, when we come back, I don't know if you guys heard the player voting for the WNBA All-Star Game, but this is the definition of jealousy, pettiness, however you want to describe it. For some reason, the players in the WNBA hate their meal ticket. I don't get it. That's next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. So I guess the WNBA All-Star Game is coming up, and it's one of those, fan vote, media vote, and player vote situations. Caitlyn Clark received a record 1.3 million fan votes for this year's All-Star Game, which, by the way, is being played in Indianapolis, where she plays her WNBA basketball. The media voted her number 3 overall. And then the players ranked her 9th, not among players in the league, but among the guards in the league. I mean, they literally, put their best defenders on her. They double team her. They try to bully her and they don't want her to shoot. They don't want her to create. And somehow she ended up being voted by the players as the 9th best guard in the league. She wasn't even the highest ranked player on her team. Kelsey Mitchell was at 3 spots better at number 6. Look, I'm not an expert on the WNBA rosters and the All-Stars and the great players. And I know that she's been hurt this year, and her stats have dipped a little bit. Her shooting percentage over the last 5 games or so because of her injury have really fallen off. But give me a break. I mean, come on, man. She is still right now top 10-ish in scoring, very, high up on the assist list. There have been a bunch of, responses to this on Twitter. Dick Vitale said, quote, on X, absolutely pure jealousy that WNBA players voted Caitlyn Clark the 9th best guard. Someday they will realize what she has done for all of the players in the WNBA. Charter planes, increase in salaries, sold out crowds, improved TV ratings. That's what he wrote. RG3 had, went off on the jealousy as well. He's been a big Caitlyn Clark. Somebody sent this to me. Let me just find it again. He tweeted out, I'm so tired of all the Caitlyn Clark hate from some players. The fans and the media clearly understand the once-in-a-generation level player. When Jordan, LeBron, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Usain Bolt, Tom Brady, and Messi came on the scene, everyone didn't like them, but they recognized their greatness and respected it while competing their butt off to stop them. They didn't vote them low on purpose. I mean, I'm not a big RG3 guy, as you know, but that is kind of the point, right? They don't have to like her. They can be jealous. They can be petty. But how can you miss out on the kind of player that she is and rank her as the 9th best guard in the game? That's just kind of stupid, isn't it? Now, I was reading this morning that they don't actually rank the guards. There's no ranking on the ballots. You just select 4 guards when you're voting as a player. So essentially, for her to finish 9th, a lot of players had to keep her completely off their ballot, which by definition is essentially they froze her out. They froze her out from their votes. Now, it's not going to matter. She's the team captain on the All-Star squad. She was voted, obviously number 1 by the fans, number 3 by the media. But it is curious, every single time I watch, and I've watched several of her games since she landed in the league last year. And and I'm not sitting there with a great understanding of the matchups heading into these games. I just want to watch some Caitlyn Clark. That's all. Never watched a WNBA game start to finish in my entire life until last year, but like millions and millions and millions of people, the first legitimate exposure to the WNBA was because of her. And what you hear in almost every broadcast, look at what they're doing to her defensively. They got the best defender. They're doubling her off every single ball screen. They're forcing her to give up the ball. How is that the 9th best guard in the league when you're defending her that way? I know she has not played well recently. It's injury related, clearly. She's missed games. So she's not been healthy. I don't even know, will she play in the All-Star game? Because I don't know if she's back or not. But how can you end up as a player? Like, it's one thing to say we're going to give her the rookie hazing treatment. That happened last year. She survived it. Now she's in year 2. And by the way, at the end of last year, many people, WNBA people, said she's right now easily a top 5 to top 10 player in the entire league with the way she was playing. And she should have easily made that Olympic team. There was some question as to whether or not she was kind of a top 20 player at the time of the Olympic team naming. Now, you talk about short-sighted. You talk about stupid. One of the dumbest things ever. Christine Brennan wrote about this. She's got a book coming out on Caitlyn Clark. We'll have her on the show. But she said in all of her years of covering the Olympics, it was the dumbest thing and dumbest decision she had ever seen. Just the increased revenue alone from her jersey sales from the Olympic Caitlyn Clark jersey sales would have made it worth it. And it wasn't like she was such an outlier. She certainly deserved to be in consideration for maybe that last spot on the team. And by the end of the year, everybody agreed. Of course, if the voting had happened towards the end of her rookie year, she would have easily been one of the top 15 players or whatever it was on the Olympic team. But you've got to grow up. Like, you may not like her. You may not like the attention she's gotten. You may be too stupid to realize what it's done for you personally, where you've been a part of the league that's never sniffed making money and now all of a sudden is, which you're going to benefit from. You may be too numb to realize that. But as a competitive athlete, at some point, put that aside in a voting and just say, I don't like her. I don't really get all the hullabaloo, but she's definitely one of the best 4 guards in the league. I mean, 9th. I can't sit here and break down the 8 that are in front of her. I just know that in the games that I've watched, basically the entire defense, or a lot of it with respect to her, has been geared toward slowing her down. So that tells me that she's probably in the conversation of something higher than 9th. It's just so the grudge, the jealousy, the resentment, the pettiness. I don't know what to chalk it up to. I honestly don't. I mean, there's, obviously an easy, very stereotypical answer that I'm not going to give because I don't necessarily believe that. But I didn't have a major issue last year with the welcome to professional basketball. You're pretty good, well, you're going to get tested by the best. And, taking it to her. And, the rookies have to earn it. They got to get bounced around. But when it comes to things like this, I mean, you got to put, a better thinking cap on. And, Vital's tweet, which you can't just you can't vote her as one of the best 4 guards because of what she's meant economically to the league. That's not the issue here. Most WNBA people feel like 9th is way, way low, and clearly an indication that players, for some reason, don't like her or are just very jealous of her or are just very petty. Sort of, they go hand in hand. Crazy. If you want to weigh in, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. I mean, how do you explain that Caitlyn Clark, voted by the players, turned out to be the 9th best guard in the league? I'm sure that there are really good players that are probably better than her at guard. And again, I know that she's missed several games, I think 7 or 8 games this year because of injury. But you can't tell me that an entire defense every time she plays is focused on stopping her, and she's not at least a top 4 or top 5 guard in the league. It's just, at some point, I said this about the Olympics. It's like at some point the adults have to get involved in the conversation and say, ladies, this is not your call anymore. We have been supporting you guys for 27 years. The reason you're able to do this is because the NBA has been funding the losses. And now we have a meal ticket that has turned us profitable, and the likelihood will turn us even more profitable as we grow. So let's grow up. Let's put her on the Olympic team. Let's sell the hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Caitlyn Clark Olympic jerseys. And oh, by the way, she's a really good player. It's not like we're elevating somebody who is just a personality or a TikTok star. Absurd. All right, 301-230-0980. Why do they hate Caitlyn Clark so much? Why was she voted the 9th best guard in the entire league? Maybe some of you are bigger WNBA fans than me, but this seems off. Phone lines are open. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app.
All right. Well, former Raiders and Giants tight end Darren Waller has come out of retirement and is being traded to the Miami Dolphins. Waller recently informed the Giants of his desire to play, but only in Miami. Milwaukee is releasing Damian Lillard to make space to acquire Miles Turner, who signed a 4-year deal. And a lot of mixed reports on Giannis Antetokounmpo, whether he is pleased or not regarding this deal. That remains to speculation. Reigning MVP Shai Gilgeous-Alexander signs a 4-year deal worth $285 million, the largest annual salary in NBA history. NHL free agency continues as the Caps signed 25-year-old defenseman Declan Chisholm to a 2-year deal yesterday. And Martin Ferravari has reached a deal to stay with the Caps after signing with the team for 7 more years on a deal worth $42 million. Tonight, the Nats return from their West Coast road trip to take on the Detroit Tigers. Jack Flaherty takes the bump against Trevor Williams. First pitch will be at 6:45. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 6:15. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1 and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the streams and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
Caitlyn Clark got the most votes ever in the history of WNBA All-Star voting from the fans. She was voted third by the media. The players voted her the 9th best guard in the WNBA. This is a player that last year led the league in facing double teams. Maybe they'll choose to start guarding her like she's the 9th best guard in the game, since they voted her that way. Now, to be fair, they actually don't rank in their voting. It was explained in a tweet by the league or something else that they just vote like their top 4 guards. So she had to be essentially frozen out on a lot of ballots to finish 9th. Like a lot of ballots didn't even have her for her to finish 9th. This is, obviously a player that has been hurting this year. She's been injured, no doubt about it. But if she really isn't a top, level guard in the WNBA, then they should start checking her that way. But they don't, because she is really good. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Phone lines are open, and we have a line or two open right now. Why do you think WNBA players dislike Caitlyn Clark? Why is she voted by the players as the 9th best guard in the league? 301-230-0980. I'll remind everybody that literally she got Sophie Cunningham worldwide recognition, increased her social media following by over 1 million followers in less than 48 hours after Sophie Cunningham came to her protection in that game about a week and a half ago. Anybody that even associates with Caitlyn Clark in a positive way is making more money than they were. But again, this isn't about necessarily the incremental revenue increase she's brought to the league, because of course that's been quantified many times over. She has essentially moved the needle comparable to what Tiger Woods did when he arrived in golf. This is a league that literally had an audience that could not even come close to pushing it over the profitability finish line. And in 1 year, the entire financial structure of the WNBA was changed. But they don't seem to care. They don't seem to like her. They seem to be jealous of her. The reaction is petty. But again, with respect to just basketball, somebody needs to explain to me how she could be the 9th best guard in the game, but draw the most double teams of any guard in the game. Explain that to me. Doesn't make sense. 301-230-0980. Let's start with Jason in Laurel. Go ahead.
Hey, bud. How you doing? Thanks for taking my call. Love the show.
Sure,
love this topic. Kevin, I love that you don't necessarily dive into political stuff, and I won't drag this into it. But it is evident here. I don't think there's a universal reason. I think it's a lot of reasons. I think race does play some element for some people, not all. Orientation plays some level, not for all. I think it maybe has more of what I call victim mentality people than any other league in the world. These people, a lot of these people, these women, these professional women, feel like victims because she's getting, attention. She's bringing people to the table, and they have it. And it is ludicrous I've been to 3 W games in my life. One, because my daughter was in the Girl Scouts and the Girl Scouts went. There were no other people like me in the stands. There were no, white dudes watching women's basketball. But now more and more are. And they're watching because of Caitlyn. Some of the controversy and stuff I think is bringing people. But I think the victim mentality is why they voted her 9th. And anybody that's watched one of her games this season or last season knows not only is she arguably the best shooter on the floor every night, but I think she's the best passer, and I think her passing is better than her shooting.
I don't watch enough of it, but I know an elite level passer when I see one and an elite level shooter when I see one. And you're right on both counts. And let me just say, Jason, I don't weigh in. No one wants to hear political views from me, which is why I steer clear of that. But cultural issues we dive into all the time. And I completely agree with you. I think that race has a lot to do with her popularity. I think the fact that she's straight has a lot to do with her popularity. But those reasons are secondary to the number one runaway reason, which is she was one of those unique players. She was Steph Curry in the WNBA, hitting logo threes and scoring 40 and 50, at the college level, taking over what college basketball was and creating unbelievable popularity. But there is no doubt that the revenue brought to the league, the increased level of interest has that race and certainly, the fact that she is straight has something to do with it. I of course, I'm not naive enough to we've talked a lot about that. We talked a lot about that last year. Let's go to Ricardo in Northeast. Ricardo, Caitlyn Clark was voted by the players as the 9th best guard in the WNBA. Why do you think that is?
Well, you just stated it, and the previous call stated it. And I probably would have to agree with that. And she might not be the 9th best guard. I don't know. I watch more WNBA than you do, and I'd have been the games for years. And my niece was a big time player. But anyway, she's been 1 for 17, I think, before.
Yeah, she's been hurt too.
Yeah. Well, if you're out there, we can't use that as an excuse. If you're out there,
do you think she's not a great shooter?
Well, 1 for 17 for 3, and we're talking about the passing. She's had numerous 10 turnover games. Yep. Where she's trying to do these fancy passes, low percentage, and even the logo threes, they're exciting, but the low percentage, 1 for 17 for 3. One thing I'll give her, she's handled everything with grace. She said the right things, and it's not her fault that the media and all these are hyping her. And but I'm just not sure, especially this year, that she deserves, maybe not the 9th best. That's a little extreme, but the reasons that you stated in the previous call stated have a lot to do with us where we are in the era of what we have in America now. It's sad, really. I wish it wasn't like that, but let's be real with it. But I always thought, I wonder what Coach Thompson would say about this, especially when they were just going to automatically put her on the Olympic team. And that's great. She's selling jerseys and all that, but I believe you got to earn it. I think Coach Thompson would have felt the same. He would have probably called her sort of like a show pony, which is, flashy, but what's the real substance? But, we'll see. That's just my opinion. But all I can say, 1 for 17 for 3, numerous 10 turnover games. Maybe this year is not the year that she deserves.
Ricardo, real quickly, because when you just mentioned Coach Thompson, I was thinking as you were talking, what would he be saying? The one thing that Coach would always include in the conversation is the business part of this. He would have understood, as a Nike board member, as a terrific, with a terrific business mind, what she has meant to a league that the NBA has been keeping afloat for 27 years. And I think he would have, weighed that appropriately, but I also think he would have understood the player she is, because she really is a phenomenal vision. Yes, you're right. She turns the ball over a lot, and by the way, I would expect that to come down as people get used to playing with her. Part of that sometimes, and is that they're not used to getting passes.
Well, then do the safe pass. I mean, I'm old school, and I like some of the fancy stuff. It's exciting, but as you're younger than me, but we back in my day, which I know it sounds crazy, a lot of the fancy stuff the coaches wouldn't have tolerated. And the 3-point game is
between the legs pass on a
game.
fast break wasn't going to fly in 85. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, I'm just saying this year maybe she's not deserving of praise. It's not been a great year for her.
A good call, and I appreciate it. I just want to emphasize that before this injury, in which she is now 1 for her last 23 from behind the arc, the games before that, the 2 games before that, she was 11 for 20 from behind the arc. She was shooting it at a ridiculous percentage until this 3-game stretch in which she finally has taken a seat because of injury. 301-230-0980. Let's go to Kenny in Southeast. Kenny, why do you think WNBA players voted Caitlyn Clark the 9th best guard in the league?
Good afternoon, Kevin.
Kenny, how are you?
Let me start off by saying I am a black man, and it's racial. What is the percentage of black females in the WNBA?
I don't know, but haven't players like Ionescu and Paige Beckers, haven't they been voted very high? Even Beckers here in her rookie season. What was that, right. Max?
But okay.
So it's 70% black, 30% white in the WNBA. Okay.
Okay, now if she wasn't in the WNBA, would we be having this conversation?
What do you mean? No, of course not. Why would we have a conversation about her if she weren't in the league?
I'm saying the WNBA is barely talked about, other than her.
Until her. Yeah, until her.
Right.
By the way, Sabrina Ionescu, she's white, correct? Isn't she the Oregon player?
Sure is.
That was friends with Kobe?
Yep.
She's white. She finished second in the player ranking among guards.
Well, I think the WNBA players need to look at the revenue and the eyes that she's brought to the WNBA.
Yes, of course they need. Of course, we've emphasized that now for a year now. Like how completely, ignorant do you have to be to the business of the league you play for to be trying to rough up and push out of the league the person that's essentially increased your compensation exponentially and will moving forward? That's absurd. But the basketball part of it, like, by the way, I'm looking at the guard rankings. Paige Beckers, she's white, correct?
Very correct.
She's 4th among the player voting. How is Paige Beckers after 10 games, Max? How is she the 4th ranked guard in the league and Caitlyn Clark's the 9th? They're jealous of Caitlyn Clark. They don't like her. They're jealous. It's petty. It's beyond, I'm not saying race and even, sexual, orientation don't have something to do with this, but it's more than that. It's like perhaps just the fact that she came in as the face of the league before she ever dribbled the ball one time and has lifted the league into a level of acceptability and exposure that it doesn't even come close to resembling what it was before she arrived there. And I think they're jealous that one player has elevated this league and the recognition of the league as much as she has. Thanks, Kenny. Appreciate it. Let's go to Reem in Waldorf. Reem, go ahead.
How you doing, Kevin?
Reem, what's up?
I hear everything that everyone's saying. I think somebody brought up a point that I was going to bring up about Caitlyn Clark's turnover. She brings up she definitely takes a lot more risk with her passes. She's a great passer. But I've been watching her since her freshman year at Iowa because I'm a big Maryland girls basketball fan as well. And right now, there's just a real big logjam of players this year that have around the same statistics that she does. Alicia Gray is shooting lights out from three-point land. She's averaging 19.5. You mentioned Sabrina. She's 18.6. I think Clark's 18.2. The only one that's really hasn't been a scorer, but more on the defensive side, is Natasha Cloud, who's ranked higher than her. But what she's brought to the game, if you've actually watched the New York Liberty play, all around, it speaks for itself. She's probably the best defender in the league. Brittany Sykes, the same thing. She's been a great asset for the Mystics this year.
Let me just ask you a quick question, because I don't want to lose this thought.
Sure.
Is Caitlyn Clark a bad defender?
Yeah, she's
Yeah,
she
because
doesn't play defense at all. She's kind of like James Harden on defense.
Okay.
It's real Olay. She's not,
I thought that was
she's
the
not
case.
strapping anybody down, and I'm not thinking that she you spend a lot of energy on the offensive side.
Yeah.
But
Reem,
yeah,
why does she draw more doubles than any other guard in the league?
Oh, because she's a heck of a shooter.
Right.
Yeah, the things that y'all are discussing are the dynamics of being a popular player and the things that she's brought to be polarizing to the league and the dynamics. That's a whole different conversation. But
I agree. I'm asking you about the basketball.
That are in the league and how they're playing this year. Even Skylar Diggins-Smith, like you said, Paige Becker, even somebody on our team, Kelsey Mitchell, they're playing outstanding ball. So you got to look at it like that too. From the outside looking, like you mentioned, I mean, you've seen Clark play, but you haven't watched the league overall.
No.
It's some tough guards in the league this year. So, yeah, her injuries definitely probably hindered her. And then, I can't say that there isn't some jealousy, but overall, it's a lot of other girls that are putting in some major work this year in the league at the guard side of the game.
No, that's interesting to me, no doubt. I do want to point out that before the injury, she was 40% from behind the arc. And then this the
injury definitely.
Yeah, the injury has definitely impacted the shooting and her overall play here in the last 3 to 4 games or whatever it is.
Yeah, but even going back to the part of where people discuss even her battles with what's next, Chicago, who they've been battling each other since she was at Maryland. And talking trash and all of them be the same. None of this is surprising from the fan that watches the game since they've been playing head-to-head against each other. So I can see, like, if they said that last year, it might be a definitely bigger argument, even though, again, like I said, I think she needs to get better at some of the decision-making with her passes. Her passes are great, but they're very risky. So she has to cut down the turnovers, which she did in the playoffs.
Look, I've watched some of those games, and they've been great passes that her teammates could not handle. Look, that's on her too. We both know that as people who love basketball. She's got to throw a catchable pass. But let me just ask you this, because I literally have to get out. I'm up against a hard break. Won't the All-Star is the All-Star format in the WNBA similar to the NBA? Like, is it possible she could go for 40 in an All-Star setup with no defense?
Healthy. Okay. Why not?
So she should go out and try to get 50 in that game.
The only thing you might have with her is that I think, like you said, because of the competitive juices and maybe some of the jealousy, they might strap her up a lot more.
By the way, that makes the WNBA All-Star game worth watching, to see if they guard her like it's a playoff game instead of an All-Star game. Good call. Appreciate it, Reem. All of you that were on hold that I missed, apologize. We got to get out of here. Chris is next.